Hey everybody, welcome to the Tim Kulig Free Music Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Kulig, and today I have none other than Madeline from the true crime podcast Crimeatorium. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I don't know about you, but I don't know why, but I always get nervous about these interviews. It's just, even when I'm recording episodes,
Mhm.
I'm on I've done over 100 now episodes. I just hit 100 last week, but every time I record, I still get nervous.
I, honestly, my past, I think the first performances I did were musically related, like when I was in like fifth or sixth grade. And in middle school, I had plays I was in where I had like solo singing or whatever. And every single time from then to now, I just turned 50 last week. And I still get butterflies. I still get weird. I still get.
So you never get over it because,
No.
before I did my podcast, I was not, I had never been in plays. I had never done any public speaking, nothing like that. So it's not something I don't even have a camera on my because I just don't like really being, out in the spotlight. It's enough for me to have my voice out there. I don't want everything else out there.
I get it. There's plenty of podcasts that are camera free and they do just fine.
I prefer it that way. And in fact, I'm not even on. I've quit using YouTube even.
I noticed that this morning. It was one of my first questions I was going to ask you, because your whole podcast catalog since what 2020 you started, I think.
Right. Yeah.
That was all on there, and I went to go look at it to reference exactly that. I was going to reference how many episodes you had, and I noticed that you had shifted over to Rumble. So
right.
You also have a Spotify, and I'm sure you publish to all the main streams, right?
Yeah, podcasting was my first thing, and then around the end of 2020. Sorry, I'll try not to say because I edit a lot of court trials and stuff, and it's crazy how many people say but it's hard not to. Anyway, so I started YouTube at the end of 2020.
Right.
And it got a lot of views. It was really doing well at first. And then new channels come along and you kind of get buried in the true crime genre.
Right. Which is apparently a big it's like the top 10. I went to Podfest this past weekend in Orlando, and true crime is just on fire. Everybody's doing it.
It's huge. It really is. And you kind of get lost in the shuffle because there's a lot of celebrities and stuff now that are doing it.
Okay.
That can market, they can afford to market and everything. But anyway, back to YouTube. So Google, I'm sure you know this, they've just come out with that new policy where you have to verify your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I ran into that. Yeah, I understand the want and the need to protect your identity and stuff, especially when you're dealing with subject matter it's
a sensitive subject matter, and I understand that.
You seem to handle it very tactfully. What got you involved with that in the first place, and podcasting in general? Like what drew you to it in 2020?
Well, I've always been interested in true crime, which really sounds strange to some people that aren't. But I think what really interests me in true crime is, first off, my mom used to read true crime books.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She was an avid reader.
Yeah.
And so she would sit up in bed and read her little true crime books. And then me, the little, mischievous one, would go in there when she would go in there, when she was done with her book. Then I would read it. And I remember, I think the first one I ever read was The Boston Strangler.
Oh boy.
And I think I went in deep. Exactly. I go all the way. And I think I was about 11 years old, which is not good reading material for an 11-year-old, but
that's definitely influential. Like, my goodness, your worldview must have been shattered.
I've turned out pretty well adjusted regardless. But um, anyway, so really what attracts me to true crime is not the gory details. I really don't like all that.
Yeah.
I won't cover anything that's has to do with cannibalism or anything like that. I don't like the gory details. I really like the whole DNA, the investigation, the court trials. That's what I find. And then the human behavior part of it, the human aspect of it.
Do you have a background in law enforcement?
Not at all.
No?
No, I was married to a police officer, but that's
okay.
all. That's my, yes.
That's the extent. Yeah.
That's the extent.
2 degrees of separation or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, in 2020, I had been, I've been listening to podcasts for about 10 years or so. And
right.
I started listening to this podcast. It was called Evidence of a Crime. And she's not doing it anymore, but I loved her podcast and I loved her accent. She was from England. And so I reached out to her on Twitter. It was Twitter back then. And her and I started talking back and forth. And I thought, man, here's this 20-something-year-old girl. She's got this great podcast. Why don't I just do it? I kind of dive in head first to things. So,
well, it's great. A lot of people talk themselves out of that stuff, right? They're like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. And they make up every excuse under the sun. Meanwhile, there's this tingling on the back of their neck saying, do it, do it, do it. And it's like, so many people. I don't want to wake up at 70 and be like, I didn't try this, like that's ridiculous.
Exactly. So, but maybe, I think now in hindsight, I would have given it a little more thought and planning because I really didn't put much planning into it. I just dove headfirst into it. I think
it's a better solution, honestly.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. Most people overthink, just like we were just saying a second ago, most people overthink the process and they get so wrapped up in that minutia that they can't get out of their own way. And I think it's applaudable that you just dove in because you fail forward, like just
right.
I'm doing the same thing this year. Like I don't know. I literally just posted this yesterday, so I'm sure you didn't hear it. But I am reevaluating what my podcast is going to be. It's going to include elements like this, interviews with people like yourself. It's also going to include Creative Commons element and a social media navigation element, because I've found over the last couple of years that there's been a real challenge with creators like yourself trying to navigate how to use music on the different spaces online. Because the rules are changing constantly, especially with all this AI stuff coming into the play.
Exactly.
It's a real problem. And I don't think anybody has a good resource to go to. And the last thing they're going to do is do anything that creates a problem for their brand or their channel. So they're just going to not use something if an error comes up. And I want to be like, whoa. I will work through all that with you. I'll whitelist your channel. I'll do the, whatever, that kind of thing. But it's a weird space right now. There's a lot of things moving around. So
it's constantly moving. You have to constantly keep yourself. But I have to say, your website has made it. I mean, it could not be any easier.
Oh,
I mean, it used to.
Ryan and Michelle are going to be like cheering in the background.
It's great. When I first found you, I think it was on filmmusic.io or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I first found you on there and I thought, man, this is a treasure trove of music, but it's not, you still had to, and as small as this sounds, when you're trying to navigate, you have a podcast and everything, when you're trying to navigate everything solo, just the littlest conveniences can make a difference. So on your website where, I can like the other day I was searching on your website for tags. I think it was, I was looking for like jazz music.
Okay.
Right. So, it's so easy. There's tags. You just click on tags. You look for the tag you want, and then you can just clip it to your the attribution. Just clip it, and you have it right there. It's so handy.
Oh, it's awesome. It's so awesome.
If people only knew, if I'd have known, well, of course now that you have your own website, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I have complete creative control over the graphic interface and everything, the experience.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's great. I wasn't pushing to, I wasn't pushing for a self-promotion there, but you offered it, so I'll take it.
Well, I wanted to put that in there, but anyway.
So do you exclusively do this? Is this your full-time gig?
It is.
That's awesome. That is so awesome.
It's great. I get to devote, I'm sitting here in my pajamas right now, if you want to know.
This is why you didn't want to be on video this morning. You're like, I'm not getting ready.
It is like 2 hours earlier here, to be fair.
That's true. I'll give you that.
But I am usually dressed by now, but I thought, well, I'm going to get all cozy and actually, I'm just kind of sitting up in bed. I've got my little laptop table here and everything. It's all nice and toasty, and it's 13 degrees outside right now.
Yeah. It's not much better here in Florida, believe it or not.
Really?
I happen to be in the horizontal parallel that's Tampa and Orlando. And this morning, I think it's going on for the next 2 or 3 days, but there's a weather front coming through the Panhandle that the Panhandle's actually getting snow.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah. I think parts of Georgia are expected to get like half a foot of snow. There's just this weird southerly.
Yeah, there is something
happening.
Right. I visited Tampa. Well, I went to St. Pete's Beach. It's probably, it seems like it was only a couple of years ago, but it was probably 7 years ago.
Okay.
And then 2 years, I absolutely loved the atmosphere. We danced on the beach, bars on the beach. It just felt like a party there, just a continuous party. It was so fun. And I fell in love with the weather. I fell in love with the people, the whole state. And so I decided I was going to move to Florida.
Oh, yeah.
After that. Yeah. And then well, it's a whole convoluted story. I won't get into it, but at the very last minute it fell through. And I was pretty devastated, but and then about 2 years ago I went to St. Augustine and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I thought it was so beautiful.
Yeah, a very artistic city.
Right. It's supposed to be like the oldest city in the United States, isn't it? I think I heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a good friend that lives there, so I had a place to stay.
Nice.
And it was great. He got to show me around, he knew all the inside scoop. He grew up there.
Yeah.
And so it was great. I loved it. I really would love to go back. I went there during the whole COVID thing, so during the entire flight, I had to wear a mask, and it was miserable, but the flight part of it.
Well, I've been here 11 years now. I don't know if I've told you this before, but I'm originally from Connecticut, and it was 11 years too short. I probably should have moved here sooner than that, because 300 days a year plus of sunny skies.
Oh man, you don't know. Well, I'm sure you do know how, because like I said, right now it's 13 degrees here.
Yeah. A little not balmy by any definition.
No. I am not going to be going outside in this today. Yeah. I don't like being cold. So that's the only, probably the biggest drawback to living in Utah is.
Yeah.
But I was born and raised here. It's my home, so I love it.
Yeah. It's Connecticut. I felt like was a little too constraining. It was one of those places that we didn't have a major athletic team. You had to go to Boston or New York City for that, and the art culture was a real pain in the neck to build. in that state. It was a, what do they call that? A bedroom community or something. Like people just go to work, they go home, and
Yeah.
the activities aren't, a Connecticut listening to this will just, or nutmegger is what they're called, will listen to this and get all pissed off and be like, "No, that's not true. There's lots of culture here, blah, blah." I'm like, oh, okay. It's an extension of New York. There's a lot of private schools there, but people tend to leave after they finish their schooling there. So, and then, again, it's another state that has income tax. So bye-bye to that for me.
Right.
I'll never go back to one of those.
I mean, I do. I would love to move there, but I don't think there's a chance I'll ever move to Florida now. But anyway, yep. Enjoy your good weather.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Be grateful. Be grateful.
So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to even start it to begin with. I mean, you obviously you listened to another one, right? You were listening to the woman from England.
Yes, evidence of a crime. Yeah.
Was there a particular case that she had that kind of made you think, I think I want to do this?
Well, like I said, I have always been sort of I guess impulsive. It would be a good word for it.
Yeah.
I don't think I put a whole lot of thought into it.
Okay.
I was listening to Jacob Wetterling. I think I was listening to that case. But anyway, I have been listening and watching true crime for so many years that it really was a natural progression for me because I have always enjoyed writing. I've always kind of had a flair for writing. And my son says, you're like a walking encyclopedia of true crime.
Yeah.
And so I did have a lot of true crime stories in my head or cases in my head because I've been watching it for years. I mean, I'm older than probably 90% of my audience, so I've got a lot of years of now if I can just recall all the cases, that's the problem. But so anyway, it was sort of a natural progression for me to do that. So, and I'm really glad I did. It's been really gratifying, and I've learned how to do a lot of things that I never thought that I would be able to do. I never edited audio. I never used any kind of audio program. Graphics. I was very limited in how to do graphics. So I've learned a lot and that in and of itself has been really gratifying.
Well, out of all that, what surprises you the most of what you've learned through this whole process of building a podcast over the last 5 years?
What surprises me the most?
Yeah, that you've learned.
I think,
and it could be show content, or it could be the process that you just described, like the things you had to learn.
I think the whole process, it's really been great to see. I mean, if you look back, if anyone looks back on or listens to my past episodes, naturally you can hear a progression of it getting better and better.
Yeah.
So
that just makes perfect, right? We got that drilled into our heads as kids. We're like, yeah, whatever, mom, blah. And then, fast forward 30 plus years later, for me anyway, I'm like, oh shit, that's a real thing.
Exactly. It really, really is. Yeah. And, just how I do a thumbnail for every one of my episodes. I do a separate thumbnail for it. I don't just use, and so I can see where my graphics has gotten better. My audio hopefully has gotten better. That's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
I'm always learning something new about how to edit audio. I don't know about you, but each episode I'm never completely happy with.
I have to force my hand. I have to force the hand and just do minimal edits and just push it out, me personally, because I could get caught up in that minutia, Madeline, and just literally just get so in the weeds with that I don't focus on my core, which is building the catalog of music, because that's really where my value add is for people. That and some of the the insight that comes from the podcast as well. But you know what I mean? Like I could sit there and really dive into the details of this audio quality or the visual quality. And that's one of the reasons I went to Podfest this past week was, okay, let's see some other tools, some stuff that could save me time. There's this one called Riverside that I'm not using right now, but I'm going to train on for a bit before my next podcast interviews and probably piggyback off of that. Cause oh my God, I caught one. I captured one last night, which was like a epilogue to that, and then basically letting people know what I'm doing this year. And what it did behind the scenes for show notes and chapters and everything else automatically, I'm like, I don't think I'll use anything else.
This is Riverside?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've never used it, but I have heard about it.
Yeah. And it's pretty cheap. I mean, it's a couple $100 a year, but
to really?
To me, that's nothing, you know?
Right.
I pay that per software instrument, basically. Every time I buy a new one, you know?
It adds up.
Oh, well, that's a path that, you know, when I think about good tools and debating whether or not I should spend that, it's a no-brainer. If it's under a certain dollar amount, or if it's at a price point like that, it's worth testing.
100%.
You know,
that is one thing. Yeah, that's one thing I've done over the years is I've really tried to get the best. Like right now, I use Hindenburg Pro for my audio.
Okay, I never heard of that.
Oh, it's mostly for the spoken word. It's designed for journalists.
Okay.
It really wouldn't be for a musician, but it is so great at just structuring your audio. You can just move things around. It's, you know, it's like putting together a masterpiece. And then I also use, and then I have the whole Adobe suite. So have, you know, so I have access to all of that. I've just ventured into using ChatGPT, and I absolutely love it. It's like, you know, I don't know about you, if you have any kind of assistant or anybody that helps you with anything, but
just me,
you know, yeah. and it can, you know, when you're juggling all of the social media and all this and trying to write and you know, with a podcast, I'm trying to write, I'm constantly on the hunt for episodes. And now I've just started another podcast, and I'm just thinking I've really bit off almost more than I can chew. So my son said, you know, you should look, and I have used ChatGPT in the past, but now I'm using ChatGPT just to bounce ideas off of and to get a brainstorm and to help it keep me organized. And it's been a lifesaver. And it's like, man, that is the best $20 a month.
Yeah. Right.
I've ever spent. It's like the cheapest 24/7 assistant that you could ever ask for. I love it.
Well, you know, you can design GPT specifically for your podcast, and you can prep it and basically train it to be a virtual assistant and a virtual person that already knows like the foundation of what you're going to be asking it about. And it's going to respond to you in a way that is surrounding the subject matter that you deal with. So you could literally spend a couple hours building the background for it and everything. And then when you need to shove a document at it or ideation, I want 12 talking points for this podcast episode, and this is what the subject is, and you shove a bunch of information at it, it'll just respond, and it'll do exactly what you're asking it to do, as if it was an authority on that subject, which is great. I mean, case in point, the potential, you know, questions I was going to send you, which are sitting right in front of me, the potential questions I was going to send you were an output from ChatGPT. I told them about your podcast. I told them, you know, the kind of things that I want to talk about, and it spit out 90% of what I sent you was unedited. I was like, that's exactly what I want to ask her. So It's a great tool. It's a fantastic
I
tool.
absolutely love it. And I think maybe there's still some people that may think, well, AI or whatever, you're kind of taking the shortcut, or I don't know, maybe people think that, maybe they don't, but I think it's crazy not to use it.
Me too. Me too. I think there are places and incidents where I don't want to use it. Full disclosure, I don't use Suno or any of those Udio or any of those things to generate my music. I feel like my core catalog needs to be pure from me because
I agree. I agree
I've
with
had a
that. Yeah.
soundtrack coming out of my head, Madeline, since I can remember. Like I'd walk around when I was 5 and hear music in my ears. It took years to convince a parent or whatever to encourage that and learn, learn how to, make my own music. But ultimately, I look at those tools right now as nothing more than ideation because I don't know if you've generated some stuff using any of that free stuff. There's it all pulls
Right.
from
No.
a language model that we don't even know what it is. So
Yeah.
you could get a melody that's a complete ripoff from something and not know it
Exactly.
and then have a
Exactly.
copyright issue. And there have been
Right.
some copyright issues coming up for
I have
for
heard
that.
that.
So
Yeah.
I don't want to mess with that. But ideation, like that's great. If I'm in a rough spot,
Brainstorming. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a great tool for that. Same thing with some of the visual stuff or the some people have written complete books and published them on Amazon. I'm like, how is that? How do you feel good about that when they're not all your words? Like maybe
Exactly.
not a single
Exactly.
word isn't yours.
Right.
Like, and did you even read it? You just pumped it out there with the hopes of, making $1 million because you saw
Well,
something on.
I've been using it for a few months now, and so you kind of get a feel for how it writes and the words it uses and whatever. So I don't think you'd be fooling anybody if you had it. Like I do have it help me with research,
Mhm.
and it'll write an outline of a script for me, but there has to be a lot of human input to get it
Yeah,
to spit out, because I have a certain way that I like my scripts to be, and Chat GPT is just not. It can get close to how I
mhm.
like it, but I have to, if I want it to help me do a script or whatever, I really have to finesse it every single bit of the way.
That's where a GPT, like a specialized GPT that you design, might be able to get you closer and save you some
Right.
time. You can literally take 20 or 30 of your show scripts, shove it into Chat GPT, and it'll get a feel for how you write. And then the the throughput and the back, what it spits back to you with future questions using that GPT may be more helpful. So that could save you some time. So
Yeah.
I would look into that in the
Well,
future.
I'm going
You
to
know,
have to. I know that I have to sort of reprogram uh, Chat GPT the way I use it now, because once again, I just dove in and started using it,
hmm
and now my memory's always full and stuff. So I have to kind of, I think I have to remove the memory and kind of reprogram it in there
Yeah.
so that, so it has everything in there that I want, and it's catered just for my needs. But also, back to you saying that you don't use any kind of AI for your music generation. I think if you start doing that, then it's going to kind of squash your creativity, isn't it?
I think ultimately, so I'll answer that by coming back to a habit that I've started to do last year. And it was partially because I wasn't sure how to just ideate on my own sometimes. Like I just, I'm not feeling motivated. Well, nothing about creating has to do with feeling, like nothing. Not exercising, making music, doing a true crime podcast, anything. It's really just putting in the reps, right? Like you
Yeah.
just have to show up most of the
Hmm.
time for it to work. And I found that some of the mornings that I literally didn't want to do anything, I had no energy. I sit down at this thing, I'm literally like, coffee. I'm like, all right, let's pull up a patch and just mess around. I don't even know what I want to make this morning. Some of the best songs I've ever written, I've been in like halfway between, you know, sleepy land and consciousness, like just because there's no filter. There's no filter. So I'll hear something, I'll hear a little melody trickle in, and I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. Well, what if I did this and blah blah, and then all of a sudden you're doing things you normally wouldn't do because you're not self-editing. You're just kind of going with the flow,
Right,
Um,
yeah.
so I try to do that Mondays and Fridays where I ideate up to 5 ideas. Sometimes it's 3 or 2, sometimes it's 10, but ultimately I try to hit that mark because that mark I picked up because I was thinking, all right, if I do 10 things a week, that's 500 ideas a year. Even if I only like work through half or a third of those, I'm still building a catalog at lightning speed, So uh, it's just simple personal hacks to keep yourself productive,
Right, yeah.
But I mean, you've been doing this for 5 years. It pays your bills. It does all the
Four,
things.
4 years.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Well, what do you think it sets you apart from other true crime podcasts? Like what
Oh
about
boy.
what you do?
Well, I don't know. We all like to think we have aspects about ourselves that set us apart, but I'm not going to kid myself and say that anything I do is much different than anybody else. But like I said, I am a little older than most audience, most of my audience. So I think in that aspect, I think that sets me apart because I have a different perspective, I think, than a lot of younger people that do it. What else sets me apart? I mean, the true crime genre, like we talked about earlier, is so saturated that is one thing I do constantly try to come up with is what can I do that will set me apart. So lately I have been kind of switching things around a little bit on how on the cases I cover. I've been covering a lot of court trials because I find court trials fascinating. So I've been doing a lot of those, just trying to kind of experiment with what I can do that will set me apart. So in answer to your question, what sets me apart? Like I said, I think we all like to think that we're different than the others.
Well, you definitely experiment with format a little bit. I mean, there's one shots stories. You have multi episodic series on for several episodes, and all things in between. So I think that I imagine just thinking about it, that keeps things fresh, right? Like, hey,
it does. And I do think that can because also I take inspiration from podcasts that I listen to. I love Case File, but the thing about Case File, he's done it the same way for, I think I've been listening to him for at least 8 years.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really it's one of the top, it's one of the top true crime podcasts out there, and he's got the same music, the same the same type of music. I don't know if you've ever listened to it, but
not personally.
It's kind of old schoolish forensic files type music. I love it. It's the same artwork, the same voice, the same format, but it has worked for him. And the way I am, I mean, I like to change things up. I like change. And so I don't usually keep things the same. I just can't imagine me doing it the same way. But I see that there is wisdom in doing that.
Well, there is something to be said about formulaic show formats. Specifically, I always come back to the Dora the Explorer example. This is complete non sequitur, kind of. But I would sit there and watch this with my daughter as she was growing up. And it has typical 3-act. There's 3 separate milestones that have to be hit. Certain characters come in every episode, and it's set up as a formula for a reason. The kid knows exactly what to expect from the beginning, middle, and end. The
Right.
resolves are similar, but the stories are different every single time. But the foundation, like the template, is the same all the time. I mean, Joe Rogan hasn't changed his podcast intro. He's been
I,
doing it for 20 years. You know?
like my son
Yeah.
told me that. He
Yeah.
says, have you seen his podcast cover?
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It looks like he did it in paint.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
But you take that away after a certain amount of time, and people get very covetous about that. They're like, no,
Yeah.
that's the thing I love about that, which is
Exactly
why I'm making changes now before I have an audience that's going to be like, hey, screw you, buddy. Like that's the big reason I stop in here. That's a trigger intro that makes me feel like I'm at home and I feel at peace listening to you. You know what I mean? It makes me feel good.
Well, there's comfort and familiarity, I think.
Most definitely.
You know, like when I listen to Case File, he releases his episodes every Saturday morning. It's the same opening music I've listened to for the past 8 years, the same artwork, and I can see that there's real wisdom in that. It's just not how I roll personally. I've just never been a person, and I don't want to say it's stagnant because it's not. It's
right. Well, it's a personal choice, right? It's a personal choice.
We're just different, and I have changed my artwork. You know, one day I'll wake up and I'll think, I don't like that artwork anymore, and I'll change the artwork, knowing that it could backfire. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, knowing that it could backfire on me, because I don't think it's a good idea to keep changing. But I that's just the core of who I am of making changes like that. So
that's why my logo and colors and everything are the same between the music and the podcast link, because I want all that to tie together, right?
Right.
And
right.
Honestly, that wasn't my intention to begin with. It kind of just happened organically on its own.
Yeah.
You know, happy little accidents, you know?
Yes, definitely. You love that.
I do when they work out.
I know. It's just great. It's like sometimes, you know, one of your questions on there was on the questions you gave me was to how do you decide where to put music in your episodes? Mm-hmm. And sometimes they are happy little accidents, like, wow, the beat will line up just right with the pauses in the audio and whatever. So yeah, I love those happy accidents.
Nice. Was there ever this is a big one for me, and I'm gonna call it out and not have this sound natural at all, because I want to read this, because I really want to know, have there ever been moments when the emotional weight of a case felt overwhelming, and how did you manage that? Because I can tell you personally, there are true crime stuff that I'm just like, oh, I don't even know how I would navigate that. You know,
exactly. Well, right or wrong or good or bad, I've been watching it and listening to it for so many years now that I am a little desensitized, sadly. Okay.
Well, understandable, you know.
Right. I mean, I can handle but I do not like gory details. I don't like bloody, gory details. I don't like dismemberment, stuff like that. I mean, if I do cover a case like that, I will touch on it briefly. Mm-hmm. I am really, I'm a woman. I'm kind of drawn to the emotional side of things, and mm-hmm. So, if there's an emotional aspect to that story, or a human aspect, that's more what I'm drawn to. But
right.
Let's see. I forgot your original question. Oh, the emotional. Okay. Well, okay. I just covered a case. It was Molly Tibbetts, and it was she was a young 20-year-old girl from Iowa. Mm-hmm. And she was jogging down she was jogging. She was an avid runner, and a man pulled up behind her. Anyway, I covered the whole trial. And so when you cover a trial, you're getting a lot of information, and it's intense, because I'll spend days editing that trial, because I just edit it down so that I can post it.
Right.
Just kind of the raw trial, but I'm editing it down. So I'm getting like overload of all this everything.
That's in real time. You're covering a trial.
No, not real time. I'll acquire the actual trial after it's already done, because I like it. I like it to be resolved and everything.
Gotcha.
So anyway, so you're kind of in that space for a solid week, just listening to all this testimony. So
right.
You sort of become acquainted, and you feel sort of a connection and attached to the family, to the victim. And so I have to say, excuse me, I had to step away quite a bit from that one. It really disturbed me.
Yeah.
For one thing, this gentleman, this man was here illegally. So that was disturbing in and of itself. You know, he really shouldn't have been here. And then,
and that in and of itself would have avoided this from happening altogether.
Exactly. Right. And that disturbed me, because here this young girl, she's in college. She's going to be a child psychologist. Just looked like a great young woman, just
whole life ahead of her, right?
20 years old, and for what? She gets her life snuffed out.
Yeah.
For nothing. And so, you know, he had confessed to it. He had led them to her body, but yet he went through the whole trial. Her family through a whole trial and everything. So that one was hard for me, emotionally. I don't even know the whole story, and it's hard for me to hear it. Yeah, you know? I did have to step away from that, but I had a timeline. I couldn't let that go on. It went on, you know, it dragged on for a week and a half. I think I released the first episode on a Monday, and then I didn't release the last one until the following Tuesday of the following week. So I can't let it go on, you know, for 2 or 3 weeks, because I'm having an emotional hard time with it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you kind of have to muscle through it.
And you do.
And move on to the next subject, right?
Exactly. And then, you know, your mind has to be on the next case you're going to cover, and on the next one, and on the next one. I mean, I'm not one of those that has 5 or 6 cases waiting for me, you know.
Yeah.
I'm constantly on researching and searching for the next case.
Yeah, and I imagine this is horrible to have to say out loud. I imagine there's no shortage of cases such as this.
Not at all. But my thing is that, and maybe it's because I have been watching and listening to true crime for so many years, that most of what I hear and listen to, I'm already familiar with it. So when I listen to a case that I haven't heard before, it's like, wow, I haven't heard this one before. So what I try to do is I do try to find lesser known cases, ones that haven't been covered a lot. So if it's been covered a lot, chances are I'm not going to cover it.
Yeah, because it's like doing a documentary on Star Wars or Lucasfilm, right? Like, how many people have done that? You know, that's why me and my best friend Tom Seymour, when we do a documentary, it's usually something obscure, and it's something that somebody hasn't covered before.
Exactly.
Like, we dealt with the films of North American Pictures, which were primarily a bunch of martial arts action films that were mostly direct to video in like the late 80s, early to mid 90s. And that was our American Expendables documentary that we did recently. And we just found out 2 days ago that it won an award for San Francisco's Another Hole in the Head competition, which is a very big deal. It's part of a much bigger San Francisco movie festival, and
wow,
a huge shot in the arm for that. So I didn't know that you did documentaries. I love documentaries. Yeah, we actually did a series. That's now the first movie is moving on 10 to 12 years old, but it's called. You can look it up on. I think it's on Tubi and a couple other free streaming sites, as well as Amazon Prime. But they're called VHS Massacre, and it talks about cult films and the decline of physical media. And we go through this this whole arc on how, because I was a video store rat when I was in my teenage years and through my mid to late 20s. I literally moonlighted at video stores, a video store that a good friend of mine owned, and or two good friends of mine owned, and literally that was like Clerks was our life. We dealt with you know unpleasant customers and great customers and everything in between, but that's pretty much how I acquired a history and an understanding of film and film production and everything, and I garnered a desire for and appreciation for independent film over Hollywood, because Hollywood's kind of pay to play, just like the music industry is with the radio.
I can't tolerate mainstream movies. I don't. Mainstream Hollywood. I love independent movies. I did not know. Now I knew that you have created music for movies because you're on IMDb.
Right.
But I didn't know that you were involved with actually creating documentaries.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So you're involved with the actual producing, filming, all that?
Yeah. To a certain extent, there are times when the last couple of movies we've done most of the work remotely and with archival footage and remote interviews, that kind of thing. Everything since COVID has kind of pushed us in that direction, but it's the way that we're able to say, my best friend has a 5-year-old daughter. So doing things, and plus he works for the New York State higher education system, college system.
Oh, okay.
So the challenge with that is how do you take all that time out and do like a 3-week shoot? You just don't. You know what I mean? You have to fit it in however you can. So what we do is we build productions around our inflexible schedules, I guess you'd call it, and do a lot of post-production and correspondence remotely and everything. It works out really good. He's in Queens, New York, and I'm down here just outside of Tampa. So, but we managed to get it done, and we managed to, it's the 21st century. There's no reason.
What a day and age we live in, huh?
Yeah, it's amazing.
You can do all that kind of stuff. But, well, that is really interesting. So are you always trying to find subjects for documentaries, or?
From time to time, when we're not in the midst of something, yeah, we'll actually have kind of spitballing sessions where we're talking about things that we've watched. Like, we won't go back and do, like I said, something mainstream that doesn't seem to resonate with us. It's usually something obscure and something that hasn't garnered enough attention, and should, because it's something that was lost. Like that whole late 80s to mid 90s martial arts film genre didn't really get a reboot until the Matrix series came out. And that even was like sci-fi with a little bit of martial arts, because the whole concept was, you're in the simulation and you can pretty much do whatever you want. So that gave it the action element that people are looking for, right? That and like John Wick brought back some stuff like that too, but it wasn't specifically martial arts. It wasn't specifically like, here's a rival dojo to this one. Like, it was kind of like there was a 6 or 7 year period in the late 50s and mid 60s where Westerns were a huge thing. And that's all Hollywood was pumping out, was like on Western. And it just became this, white noise at some point, and then they flipped the switch on sci-fi again and other things and dramas. But you could just see it. You could see how there's like a wax and wane of genres and styles, and people just are all in with the MCU, and then there's Avengers Endgame, and then they try to strike gold again, and there's just miss after miss of just overproduced, over budgeted, bloated budgets. I could tell you things about movies that would make your head spin. Some of these movies that cost $200 million, it's $500 million to break even on a movie like that. $500 million.
Oh my word.
And that's before they take home dime one, because you lost, if you go back and watch, if you have any time for it, and it's a subject matter that you enjoy. The VHS Massacre series that we did really dives into a bunch of elements about how there's no revenue streams anymore like there was before. Physical media is going away. So
Right. Yeah.
it still exists, but it's not nearly the source that was there before. Like if you had a Hollywood movie, I'll briefly talk through the numbers here. You had a Hollywood movie and it cost you say 50 million to make, and it did poorly in the theater. Let's say it did 20, right? Well, you split 50-50 with the theater, so it only made 10, right? So you're still in the whole 40 plus whatever in, advertising you did. You still had pay-per-view, which is usually a 90-day window of exclusivity.
Oh yeah, I forgot about pay-per-view.
Then you had the streaming networks like HBO,
Right.
Showtime, Movie Channel, and they would have exclusivity for a while. Then you'd have, if it was a small enough run, the video stores would have to pay for those tapes. Those tapes were like 60, $70 a piece if they weren't what was called sell-through. And sell-through is like you could just get it at Walmart once it's available on tape, right? And I'm saying tape because we're still talking the VHS / early DVD era, right?
Right.
But tapes would cost you 60, $70 a pop. Now
Oh,
think
wow.
about that.
That's a lot.
You're an independent video store. You rent these things for $350 a piece for 2 nights. That's 20 turnovers before you break even on it.
Oh my word! I had no idea.
Yeah. So
and then if people don't return them, man, that can get pricey.
yeah. So there was all that line, and then eventually all movies go to what's called sell-through, which is like a standard retail price. So there's I literally listed off like 10 things of a way to get money. Now it's theater, streaming. That's it. And maybe in between theater and streaming, you get a rental / purchase, limited time frame on Amazon or
right.
one of those things. So
right. I never thought about that.
It's a whole different industry now. It's a whole different industry. But the problem is that you have most are aging and aging out in some ways, but you have a history of actors and actresses and like big time composers and producers and directors that command and demand a certain amount of money for a movie, but there's just 20-30 million dollars a movie for just one person. That makes no sense. That makes no sense anymore. That they have to kind of ride. You know what I mean?
Are they still getting that amount? I mean, I don't watch mainstream Hollywood movies anymore.
In some cases, yes, but there's been a shift too. Like when Netflix commissions a studio to do a specific movie, like Don't Look Up, that movie that was on Netflix about I don't know if you've heard of that one. It had Jennifer Lawrence in it, Leo DiCaprio, and it was about a meteor or comet going to hit the planet and wipe out all civilization.
Yeah.
The two of them were both paid, I think, somewhere like 12 or 15 million a piece, but that's it. They don't get any residuals. So it's different than traditional Hollywood, which is they get residuals every time it plays somewhere. You get a cut of everything, right? So a whole different animal. But like that whole industry's changing. I think you're going to find in the next several years there's going to be a major contraction in Hollywood for a number of different reasons. Some of it's the subject matter, and the subject matter interspersed with the stuff that they produce. It's also people are tired of unoriginal content. They're tired of somebody pumping 100%. out, Saw 15. Like, how many versions of this are you going to make? It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's probably a bad franchise to mark because that franchise is doing very well.
What did you say it was?
Saw.
The
Saw franchise. I don't like torture porn. I think that's the weirdest thing in the world. I just don't
think I've ever seen one of those. And I do like scary. I like scary movies, but I wouldn't like that. But
what blows me away is Carrie Ells from The Princess Bride is in the first one.
Oh, really?
Whatchamacallit? He's the one that took over. You've seen The Princess Bride, I'm assuming, right? From years ago. Yeah,
years
yeah.
ago. I just do not watch movies very much.
But he's the last person I figured being in a horror film like that. It's just bizarre.
I just do not like, and especially maybe because I'm a little bit more aware of it now than I used to be. But I can't. Hollywood movies, it just maybe it's more prevalent now than it used to be because it seems like it is. Even kids' movies, they seem to be so full of propaganda type stuff.
Yeah. And I wonder,
messages, little subtle messages. And it's like, I just want to go and watch a movie. I don't want to be, try to have it sway my opinion, even subtly.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that there are that Hollywood movies do that. And I guess they've always done that, but I'm a little bit more aware of it.
I'm more aware of it now. And I think part of the reason for that is maybe it's not as subtle as it used to be.
Maybe so.
That being said, there were some unsubtleties that have disappeared. Like, people don't just blatantly smoke in movies like they used to. Every movie,
I know.
they would smoke constantly, right?
I mean, that was the thing. I mean, for a while here in the last 6 months, I really got into watching 30s, 40s, and 50s movies because I just think they're so great. But everybody in those movies smokes.
Yeah.
But they quit. I think they quit doing that maybe like in the 80s.
Maybe, there was
maybe the 90s.
Some push to
where
in general, like that we need to like de-emphasize this.
And I can see that. I can see the wisdom in that because you don't want to glorify something like that. But
you notice the difference of movies from that era as opposed to now. I'm curious to know if you can see this, and I don't even want to prep it. What would you say is a major difference between movies from that era and today? Like compositionally, what would you say is different? I'm curious to see what your response would be.
Composition. Oh my gosh!
Like the shots, the different shots.
Oh, the different shots.
Yeah.
I mean, I can visualize the difference. I don't know if I can describe it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I know for me, based on how they make me feel and how much more I enjoy movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even 70s. But from the
I would say this. Go back and watch it and pretend you're going to a play. And then tell me how you feel about it, because the older movies still had that compositional element. They looked at scenes as if you were doing a stage play still, because movies were still they were still evolving into that medium for a while. And you see a lot more establishing shots and action shots and movement shots today in today's films than you did back in like the 40s and 50s. In the 40s and 50s, you'd have a straight shot, maybe with a couple side angles and everything of conversations, but in essence, you'd be looking dead on to a scene, right?
Okay, yeah.
You would have other establishing shots and whatnot too, but I just to go back and look at like a movie like South by Southwest with like their big scene was like the plane dive bombing that guy on the road, right? And but most of the movie was situational in rooms and offices with like straight on shots.
Oh, you're right now. I understand what you mean. It seemed more like an art piece or something. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I always found that very curious because at some point between like the 60s and 70s and there was other movies interspersed, but like there was a general shift away from that kind of composition to something more fluid and moving from one place to another. And you saw those transitional shots that helped establish. And then there was they overdid it. Like so many new auteurs, directors would spend 20 minutes of an hour and 20-minute movie with car scenes that were just filler to make it, an 80-minute movie.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
go look at amateur movie, you're going to see a lot of establishing shots of people driving around and going like just unnecessary, just okay,
Right.
we're in a car again for no reason. you know, just
I
crazy
do
stuff.
so much prefer independent anything.
Yeah.
I mean, not something that's overly polished. Something that's maybe a little rough. Not saying that the 50s and 60s movies were, but that just goes to even podcasts. I like ones that are, that I know it's an independent, podcaster.
Yeah. If it's too refined and there's too much production in it,
right?
It feels forced to me.
It does. It
is
does.
This kind of banter where we don't have all the answers right off the top of our head.
Well, it's
but we know how to communicate.
It's a little more genuine, and I think that's what we all kind of want these days as a genuine. We're all kind of disconnected these days to a certain extent because we're able to connect like this.
Right.
But is this a genuine connection? Yes, to a certain extent, but it doesn't take the place of connecting in real life.
Right.
And so when you can get anything that's genuine out of a podcast episode or whatever, I think we gravitate towards that.
For sure. And I think we've evolved as a people to accept this alternative medium because, quite frankly, people just don't have it in their budgets to fly to Utah and do a personal, thing like this, or anywhere for that matter, and do all that when we can connect in a way that feels authentic like this, and we can have an open discussion and just casually discuss whatever subject matter you're talking about, whether it's true crime, whether it's free music for your content or movies or anything in between. It's amazing that we have the capability for as little as it costs. Anybody that complains about the cost of production right now, I take my phone out and show it to them. I go, this is 4K. All right.
Exactly.
This is 4K. I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max. I could film an entire movie on this and submit it to film festivals, and it would be in the resolution. It would be in a better resolution than
it's
bunch
insane.
of their films.
Really, I choose to spend money on, I have the whole Adobe suite, and I have, I think my Hindenburg Pro, it was probably $200.
Okay.
And I have a few, I subscribe to ChatGPT. I subscribe to 11 Labs. I have all these different, and
11 Labs is great.
I love.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it is fantastic. I do use that, but I choose to do that. But really, you could do a podcast for free, or very close to it. I mean, with all the programs out there,
you could grab Audacity.
Exactly.
Or
that's what
OCR, not OCR, ODB.
OBS.
OBS. That's it. One of those
OBS.
acronyms.
OBS. You could, and there are free platforms that you could host your podcast to. I mean, if anybody, and you could use your phone, like you said, you could use your phone to. But I have chosen, because I do like to try to have the best hardware and software that I can afford. I mean, I have like 4 different microphones just because I like to. I mean, I am a little bit, I think, of a perfectionist when it comes to the quality of my episodes, even though it might not show. But
you're audio only, so you're going to focus. You're going to focus
Exactly.
on all the tools that do that, right? Absolutely.
And like the other night, even when I was doing videos, and I had never done videos either. I just use Filmora for my videos, and I've really liked it. But I like Monday I released a new episode, and it was only a 22-minute episode, but it took me 6 hours to edit that. I mean, a little 22, but like you said, I get caught up in the little minutia. If I see a little click in there, I hate those things.
Yeah.
the little ticks and clicks. And I swear, even after I've edited it, new ones appear.
I'm going to be at the mercy of my audience as it grows going forward because I just don't have the time to go back, especially if I do a long interview and I end up using most of it. And, so it's like an hour and a half. I did one with a fellow composer that used to be on that other website with me, John Bartman. And he's based out of South Africa. And we went on for like 2 hours and it ended up being like a very casual, us chatting to each other half the time, not even caring about the audience, and then him playing some music interspersed and talking about origins and everything. It was fantastic. In fact, John, if you listen to this episode, we got to get together again soon because that was a lot of fun. We did it back in June of last year. And
okay.
managed, again, another example. I can't fly to South Africa to do a in-person interview.
Right. But the thing of it is, this genre, this format of interviewing and speaking back and forth, you don't really need to worry about editing it too much. I mean, that's what makes this acceptable, because to have a few mistakes, I mean, I've been clearing my throat and whatever, and I don't know if you're going to edit that stuff out, but
no. In
a true crime podcast,
you're coughing on my podcast.
I know, it's like my throat this morning. Anyway,
I just joined you.
But in a more of a produced, I mean, it has to be somewhat produced if you're going to do a podcast episode.
Yeah.
Some people don't, though. Some people don't really edit a whole lot and everything. I could not. For one thing, I make too many bloopers. I mean, I mess up words constantly on my podcast because, like we said before, I'm never not nervous before I go to record an episode. I am always nervous about it. I don't, I wish I could, have a few glasses of wine before I do it, but then I'll be slurring my words. That wouldn't be good either. but
it does get like, me personally, this has gotten easier over time. And I think part of it is in the back of my head, I'm always thinking about the value add and the value proposition that my whole business conveys, which is free music. Like what I'm offering people is something they need anyway. And it's, I've never had anybody be in a negative reaction to the idea of being able to use it with attribution.
Offering for me personally, music is a big part of my episodes. I can't even imagine not having some music in there. And I know some people don't choose not to have music in their podcasts. And to me, it's just, it would, if I didn't have music, it would be like having a cake without frosting.
Yeah.
You just got to have it. It just completes, because each episode for me is like my little masterpiece. And I want it to be perfectly, and I know it's not perfectly composed because I'm not a musician. But I try to compose it as perfectly as I know how to do. And music just adds so much to it. Plus, it's a security for me. I mean, I don't have a perfect voice. I make little errors. I think we have a certain way of pronouncing things here in Utah. And I'm hoping that the music will help smooth that over a little bit. So you are offering an incredibly valuable service to us creators. I hope you know that.
Well, I'm glad it's I know it's well received from you. This is, what is it? I can't think of the the cultural standard thing to say in this case. Like I'm talking to what? I'm talking to the I forget the saying, but there's a saying that's like, I've got a fan that's one of my bigger fans. Of course I'm going to hear that from you. And I graciously and humbly appreciate that completely.
And another thing I wanted to let you know too is you have such a wide variety of music And I don't like to be I don't like to be hold myself to just one genre of music, for lack of a better word. I can't think of the word I want to say, but so I'll go through your catalog, and I don't say I'm only gonna, search for dark and mysterious, which is what I mostly use.
Right.
But sometimes I'll listen to some of your tunes and think, okay, I'm going to change things up a little bit and use that genre just to be a little different,
I think you've used some of the cyberpunk stuff before. I'm just guessing. You clearly use some of the jazz, which is like the last thing I would have thought.
I love your jazz on there. I really, well, on some of my more lighthearted episodes, like some of my bonus episodes, last week I put one out. It was about this woman in, I think she's in Florida actually.
Okay.
And I get a lot of good cases from Florida. I don't know what it is about Florida, but anyway, this
crazy from the heat.
I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of crazy crimes in Florida. But this woman, she called 911 400 times. Just I don't know why she did it, but it was all unfounded. They would take her to the hospital. She didn't need anyway. That's a little bit of a lighthearted,
like
different.
Ma'am, maybe you shouldn't own a phone.
I mean, what a waste of resources. I mean, she was on Medicaid, so Medicaid was paying for it. But anyway, so for cases like that, I have a certain intro that I use that I had a guy record for me and then I'll put one of your more lighthearted tunes to it, like a jazz tune or whatever. So I guess my point is that because your catalog's so sizable, that it gives me a lot to choose from. And when I'm listening to your different music, it inspires, creativity and going beyond, any boundaries that I might have. Oh, if that makes sense.
That's great feedback, because one of the reasons I specifically choose to do multiple genres is I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to write the same song 100 times, right? I don't want to write the same horror tune 100 times. I want to write the same electronic music.
I could see that because I have seen it. I have seen other musicians or creators.
Look at professionals, not to poop on any particular band or any era, but there's plenty of bands that I've followed over the years that have had like 3, 4, 5 albums, and that's it. They don't go beyond that. Maybe they have a little solo project or something. They had a couple one-hit wonders. I'm sure they're fine financially if they had somebody looking out for them and making sure that they weren't just pissing their money away. But ultimately, like, I've already surpassed a bunch of those heroes by many times X of producing music. Now, granted, my production value as high as somebody that worked with Rick Rubin or somebody like, no. But they certainly resonate with people. And I'm not writing for radio. I'm writing for content creators and movies and TV. And I'm not interested in fitting some standard model of music, which I honestly wouldn't be opposed to exploring, traditional mainstream music styles as something to explore, but not as a foundation for everything that I do, because I know there's formulas for music. There's some of the best and most famous songs in the world have 4 chords, and they're the same 4 chords across all of those songs. And there's something about those 4 chords that resonates with everybody. And it's the reason those songs are successful. That, and the fact that they're paid to play, so that you're just shoved down your throat. So, I guess this is the next big thing. It's only the next big thing because they're making it the next big thing. They were doing that in the 50s with the king of rock and roll out of Memphis, like they were all engineered. I mean, the whatchamacallit, not the Beatles, the Monkeys,
Stones?
the
Yeah, the
Monkeys,
monkeys.
the
You don't
TV.
remember the monkeys.
That was a completely fat. They never played together before that show.
You know what? They were
Yeah,
pretty decent though.
yeah, but that was an engineered
It
band.
was an engineered. Yes,
Yeah,
it was.
yeah,
Yes,
and that's happened tons of times. And Sync, Boys to
yes,
Men, all that. Those are all engineered groups, and
exactly.
so it's interesting. Like you have to battle that, but nobody's paying like your true crime podcast doesn't have the budget or doesn't want to pay royalties to a band like that to have their music on your thing. Like
No,
that's not. And there's plenty of people out there that aren't in the capacity to do that. I'm not saying your podcast needs to be taking in $10 million a year to be legitimate. It's just it's not. There's scale, right? Everything has a certain scale.
no. I mean, I don't. I can tell you right now, I pay way more per month than I bring in per month for my podcast.
Yeah.
So
Well, what platform do you distribute on, if you don't mind me asking?
who's my hosting platform?
Yeah.
I use Red Circle.
Okay. I don't
And
think
who are you?
I use Podbean.
I've used Podbean before, and that's
Yeah.
another mistake I made early on. Is I would platform shop,
Mhm.
and I think, oh man, that sounds like some good benefits for that. So then I'd switch over to that, and then so over the years, with all the switching around I did lose some listeners in the meantime. But speaking of your podcast, I was looking for it this morning and I couldn't find it. What's
You
it
can go to my
called?
website, the Tim Kulig Free Music Podcast.
Now, I know that I use Overcast to listen to my podcast. And
Okay. I don't know if it publishes to there.
well, it gets its feed from Apple. So as long
Okay.
So that's what perplexes me as to why I cannot find it on because I've looked for it before and I wanted to let you know, hey, I can't find your podcast.
Well, that's good to know. I'll look into it because
I mean, it should be on there. You don't have to submit to that one separately, but you could,
right?
Because for whatever reason, I'm putting in the Tim Kulig and it's not coming up. But like I said, Overcast gets its feed from Apple. So as long as, and of course you're distributed to Apple.
Right.
For whatever reason, I've looked for it before and I can't find it. And also, I don't know if you want this sort of feedback, but on your website, there's been at least 3 or 4 songs that I've tried to play that won't play.
Okay. If you just let me know which ones you're having trouble with in the future. And
yeah, I will.
I can point to, I can either go back in and resubmit it to my site because I have a whole administrative panel built on the back end, and there might have just been some glitch on the uploading process. So that's really good to know.
Right.
I won't know unless I'm told. So,
exactly. And that's what I thought. But it's like, I know you're busy and I don't want to keep bugging you about little things.
That's not a bug. That's awesome.
Okay.
Awesome feedback.
How are you going to know unless somebody tells you?
That's right.
And then,
that's right.
And then there have been slight issues with scrolling that I've noticed on it.
That's changed. We just had, if you haven't looked in like a week or so, we recently did a rollout so that it'd be lookable, like searchable on a phone, because that capability wasn't in place with the first iteration of the site. So last Wednesday or Thursday, there was an update that was sent out that did the phone update, and now the scrolling has been updated.
Well, I never look at it on my phone.
Okay.
I do everything on my laptop, but what I've noticed is sometimes when you're playing a song, like if you click on it, you want to play it, and you're kind of almost to the bottom of the. I hope I explain this okay.
No, you. I think I know where you're going. But go ahead.
you can't scroll past, because the part where it's playing your song is kind of in the way of you being able to scroll further down.
Yeah.
And it seems like at one time you used to be able to collapse that little part that was playing that song to allow you to scroll all the way down. And it seems like you can't do that now. But I'm always got a bunch of things in my head.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't paying up
No,
a lot of
that's really good feedback. It's a known glitch as well. That's going to be another patch that's
Okay.
coming out soon
Okay.
too. But
Okay.
but anytime you see stuff like that, absolutely, Madeline, you're welcome to
I
shoot me an
will.
email. I won't consider it. I
Okay.
consider any of that feedback, positive, negative, a positive to me because I want it to be from what you said in the beginning. The functionality of the site is intended for you and you alone, like the you end users. Like it's supposed to make it as easy as possible to get what
And
you
it
want
is, and it
and get.
really is. It could not be any easier. I mean, when you were on SoundCloud and Pixabay,
Mhm.
Pixabay's not bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
but you got to know what you're looking for. That's the problem with Pixabay.
Pixabay. In fact, I am surprised at how many good songs are on Pixabay. A lot of them are AI generated, but
Hmm.
there are some good composers on there. But SoundCloud, I couldn't stand it because every few songs you had to listen to a 30-second ad.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that you brought that to my attention and it never was an issue for me because the very nature of me uploading all my stuff there, I have to have a pro account and I
Right.
don't get ads. So
Yeah.
it didn't even occur to me that people are getting advertisements every
Yeah.
couple
And
songs that you listen to.
sometimes you
So
get, you every maybe 4 or 5 songs you listen to, you
mhm.
have to listen to 1 or 2 ads. And right, I could get a subscription with SoundCloud, but why? I'm not going to do
Yeah,
that.
but you don't have any reason for it, right?
No.
Whereas I have multiple sites that I host my stuff on, including my personal website, which is the big push this year to get as many people to that as possible. But that being said, I'm not going to stop posting things to SoundCloud and Pixabay because some people only know me for there, you know?
Right.
And if I stop, then they're going to think that I stopped making music and maybe not be as interested in what I do. So it's a weird thing where you have to kind of be everywhere but nowhere at the
Exactly.
same
So
time.
do you make revenue off of SoundCloud?
SoundCloud, no, but I do make it everywhere it's published. I use DistroKid, which is a self-publishing management tool that
Oh, okay.
pushes
I've never
out
heard
to
of it.
pushes out
Oh,
to
okay.
Spotify, Apple Music, all the social media platforms. Like if you went into to Instagram and made a reel and looked for a sound, and you go into the search bar and you type in my name and the name of a song, it'll come up,
Mhm.
and you can just drop it into a
Oh,
reel,
okay.
that kind of thing.
Oh,
So you
okay.
can do that with YouTube Shorts as well. YouTube long format, you have to drop music in there, but you already know. Well, you've kind of distanced yourself from that platform anyway, but you know that uh, on that platform you have to give attribution or they're all registered with
Exactly.
content ID.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that was to protect you guys because I had other royalty-free composer friends that were just getting lambasted with claims from somebody else claiming, submitting a bunch of their tunes and registering a bunch of their tracks. And unraveling that after somebody else tries to do it is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Because you got to show like basically a chain of custody, show people that, yeah, I wrote this. Like, why am I fighting over something that is mine?
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
unfortunately, well, you've clearly told me what drew you to my stuff, the original foundation, that site that you went to
Well,
initially.
I found you on film. And in fact, I was looking through some old episodes of mine and I noticed that I had used one of your songs, oh, probably 3 years ago. And and didn't wasn't really that familiar with you back then. I think
Yeah.
I was trying to think of how I became familiar and started really following you. Must have been when I found you on film. Yeah, because I found you on filmmusic.io and found you and downloaded a bunch of your songs off of
Okay.
there. And then you moved off of there,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Because now it's just Sasha Ende on there, right?
yeah, he made a choice last January, February to make it his own place. He kind of waxed and waned between being a boutique site that celebrated a group of people and not wanting to play administrator. I think he ran into a bunch of problems in the back end with people with content ID claims as that system was
Right.
evolving.
Yeah.
And he had a different philosophy when it came to royalty free and Creative Commons music and how you can present that than I think most of the users on that platform. So he just opted to ask everybody to kind of see you later, and this is just going to be my music, and
well, he
that's
doesn't.
that.
You know, that I was looking at his stuff the other day, and he's got some good songs too.
Yeah,
but he doesn't require any kind of attribution.
Yeah, he opted to go. There's a Creative Commons attribution that
4.0 or something like that.
Yeah, well, 4.0 for me, I use 4.0, but it's with attribution. So it's the evolution of 3. But I think he just does it for him. It's a hobby. It's not a career.
Right. That's what I gathered. Yeah.
So I think he's less interested in the minutia of that and trying to gain revenue from it. Whereas a lot of the people on that platform that were there as guest artists, in essence, were really trying to push their brand and their collections as a viable source for things and for potential sync licensing and everything else. Not unlike myself, but the challenge is that you've got 2 different philosophies, right? So ultimately that created a severance that was bound to happen. So, but I wish him the best. That's
I mean, in my limited, knowledge of music composition and whatever, he seems talented to me. Some of his songs are really good, and I like to donate. I like to support whoever I'm using. I want to feel good about using people's material, and so
just be mindful. He's shifted to a big AI component with a lot of his stuff.
I've noticed that, but he clearly lists the ones that he's.
Yeah, that's good. That's good because I think that's an important.
You know what? Even if it is AI, you still have to know how to prompt that along to create, because some of the songs he's created with AI, I don't know what he's using, but
it's Suno. It's probably Suno.
Some of them are really good in my limited understanding.
Yeah.
Some of them sound really good to me, but I wanted to find a way to donate or support him, and he doesn't even have any way on that site to even.
No, there used to be what is Stripe? I think that was a platform that
I could
all
not
sync through.
Any.
But yeah, I think it's just evolved into
to keep it simple, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, just take it, use it, whatever,
Yeah.
When he feels compelled, he makes new stuff.
I just don't feel good about even doing that. So I haven't really used a whole lot of his stuff because I do want a way to be able to at least acknowledge, and I guess you still can. I mean, you can still acknowledge, but right now it's just easy for me to use. I use you, and then I use another gentleman that's been doing it for quite a while, Coag Music. You ever heard of him?
No, I haven't heard of them. COAG?
Yeah, COAG. Just look him up on. He's got a lot of the same type of genre. He's
check him out.
Yeah, I mean, I and a lot of people use him. I mean, that's how I found out about him.
Yeah,
a lot of people, especially in true crime and horror and all that, use his music.
Well, I'll definitely check him out.
He's on.
What about his style people are resonating with?
Yeah, he's on YouTube, and he's got, I've got hundreds of his songs, and so I've tried. Now I've just tried to keep it simple. I just use you and him because I've got way too many songs to choose from.
Yeah, at some point it becomes cost prohibitive or labor prohibitive, right?
It does because a lot of the good music gets lost in the, amongst all the music I have. And when I'm putting together my podcast, I don't map it out to the exact what song I'm going to use beforehand. After I'm done recording and editing, then I go in and choose what music I want to use. And by that time, I'm ready to be done with it. I'm just ready to watch some videos or something and
and relax.
And relax. And so So I've just simplified it now to where I just use you and Coag.
Well, I find like it's an interesting thing. Like I know I'm not so naive as to think that, oh, I could be everything to somebody. That's never the case. Like, there's times where the music's going to resonate with something that you're producing,
Right.
and then other times it's not. And there's other people and other people's music and other moods that are generated. I think that took some time for me as an artist, if I'm being fully disclosive, that early on, and it probably had a lot to do with ego and
Right.
the
Exactly.
fear of like, well, if you go with somebody else, then you're not using my thing, and then are you just going to forget about me? They're like, no, like that's my job is to make the stuff, right? My job is
Exactly.
to create the mood, create the sonic, piece, if you will, and whoever it resonates with, and whoever wants to use it for things, that's my value, that's my contribution. I
Mhm.
write things that I love that nobody gives a damn about. Right? Like that doesn't resonate with them. But I'm like, I love making that, and I'm going to listen
But
to
it
it myself. I
but
might be
it
the
will
only.
resonate. It
Yeah,
will, and
yeah,
you do think that you put yourself out there. Even as my true crime podcast, you're just putting yourself out there and hoping that your different characteristics that come through in that episode, or the way you pronounce things, or the way you construct your episodes. I just hope it resonates with somebody.
yeah.
And you are putting yourself out there, but
Well, yours clearly does. If I recall correctly, on YouTube, you had a following of 20 in the 20,000 range, something like
I
that.
did, yeah.
Yeah. And was that all organic? Did you advertise?
It
Or
didn't. No, I did not advertise.
that's amazing.
It happened really fast. And again, I think my earlier episodes were more ones that hadn't been heard of. They were kind of obscure crimes that I remember happening, especially here in Utah.
Hmm.
And so when I posted those, they got a lot of traffic. And then again, I made some mistakes. I've taken some breaks throughout the 4 years. I haven't been as consistent as I should have been.
Hmm.
And so my and if you drop out of sight for any period of
Yeah, people
time,
just move on, right?
people are just going to move on. That's
I
right.
think I think at Podfest they said um, anybody that's an avid podcast listener has 5 to 7 podcasts they listen to consistently. That's it. So
Yeah,
you either have to be consistent and resonate with them, or they're going to move on
exactly.
to something else. Right.
Right.
So, uh, or they just out of loyalty and commitment are consistently listening to you regardless of your scheduling,
Exactly.
your
And
intermittent scheduling.
YouTube is a harder audience. I mean, they're pretty critical.
Yeah.
And that was kind of hard for me at first. Some of the mean comments I was getting, I wasn't prepared for that.
Well, the thing I've learned too recently is that unless they're damaging the brand, everything is worth it because
It
the
is.
algorithm does not care about
No, you're
the
right.
context of the comment. And if you have enough of a following and you create this crazy interaction where people are just battling each other, like some people engineer that because that alone is going to drive traffic to the content.
Exactly. It is. It is.
I feel
Yeah.
that's a little it's that's in ingenuine,
Right.
and
Yeah. It
and
is.
inauthentic. I feel like if that happens organically by itself and somebody really hates a piece that I did and suddenly there's like this big battle and great, go ahead. Like even negative response to a music as a response, it means it
Exactly.
triggers something in you that you're like, oh, I can't stand that. What didn't you like about it? What about it didn't you stand? Like, I
Mm,
want to understand. I don't want to turn like at this point in my self-esteem or I don't know, maturity. Like, it's not about getting you to like me. It's fine. You may never want to listen to me again after that. but I want to know what triggered you. Like that's
Mhm.
what was it? Was it just something personal?
That's a healthy way to look at it.
Yeah.
And as long as you're kind of prepared for that sort of thing, like I said, I jumped into this, and when I got on YouTube, I was not prepared for some of the mean comments, and I'm not going to lie, I thought I had a thick skin,
Mm.
but they got to me because I did sort of take it personally. That's my creation, you know.
Right, right. I worked in construction for 17 years in various capacities, in the field for a little bit, and then mostly in the office, and then ultimately controller, like CFO, second in command
Mhm.
for a outfit out of Connecticut.
Mhm.
And I can tell you one of the main reasons I had the thick skin that I do is from working with the guys in the field. You just, if they weren't ribbing you, they didn't like you. And when they rib
Mhm.
you, it felt like they didn't like you. So you either, no matter what, you were like, it was a way that they got that stress and tension of the physical job and the tight deadlines and everything. Because we were drywall, metal framing, and finished carpentry. So we were always like at the tail end of a job. And if a job went belly up or the Gantt timeline got pushed because of trades from the beginning, we tended to be the folks that came in and helped bring the job in under the right timeline. So a lot of stress associated with that, you know, that coupled with juggling contractors not paying you and all that and making
Mhm.
payroll and all that. Oh, I don't miss that.
I was a CFO for I was a
Were you?
CFO for a while. Mhm.
Yeah.
Lot of pressure. Yeah, chief financial. There was a lot of pressure, but I did want to, before I forget, I
Yeah.
did want to bring up this new podcast that I just started called
Yes.
Enigmatorium.
Yes. Tell me about
Now,
that.
so, I came up with the name Crimatorium again just on a whim. It just popped into my head, but it really turned out to be kind of a good uh, branding opportunity because a torium is a great suffix because you can put all kinds of words in front of it and it just kind of works. So it's really kind of worked for a good brand. But anyway, so I've got several other projects with that suffix atorium attached to it.
Oh, very good. I can't
That I
wait to
will,
hear more about that.
well, I will never have time. I mean, I have so many projects in my head, but there is no way I can juggle it all. I'm barely able to juggle Crimatorium. But now I have sort of committed to this Enigmatorium because I've released the trailer and everything. And
Okay.
I am kind of excited about it because it's a nod to the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I still owe you some things on that. And I'm aware of it. But
No, but but the reason I brought that up is because we were talking about your catalog of music, and there is so much in your catalog that will go right along with that podcast,
awesome. Awesome.
the episodes. But basically, what I'm doing is I really loved the Twilight Zone growing up. I watched it, and I loved the whole ambiguous storylines and kind of scary. But anyway, so I was going to have it be nonfiction along with fiction,
Mm-hmm.
sort of paranormal, but now it's evolved to more just eerie type stories. And now it's just kind of fictional stories. And I've been writing, I've got probably 5 written for it, just ready to roll out. But my schedule, I am so, I have a life outside of my podcast. I've got things I got to take care of. You know,
No.
I
This is all you
listen,
do, right?
I like to cook, so I grind my own wheat and make homemade bread every week. I made some
Oh, that
jam.
sounds lovely.
Yeah, I made some
Sounds
pear
awesome.
jam. I made some pear jam last week. I make granola. I like doing things like that too. So I'm trying to balance.
Well, you're not gonna
my
have any problem if we ever go off grid.
No
I'm gonna
kidding.
starve to death in a week.
No kidding. Yeah. Which is another thing. I've always wanted to do that too, but that's a topic for another time. But
Yeah.
my point is that I've got so many projects in my head, so many ideas for different podcasts. And once again, I just threw this Enigmatorium out there as a nod to the Twilight Zone.
Nice.
So I do have some episodes that are ready to be recorded. I just need to pin it down to where I'm probably only going to do 2 episodes a month of it.
Well, that's cool though. I mean, that's still, to me, that's still pretty consistent. You get two very unique sci-fi,
right, sci-fi eerie,
yeah,
a nod to, the Twilight Zone. The gatekeeper is named Serling Gate, named after Rod Serling. Serling. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you could delve into a lot of weird things like UFOs and cryptids and
Exactly.
what else is there? Like the Black-Eyed Children. That's a weird story.
Yeah. But I would like to get some true story, nonfiction stories that go along with it too. But it has to fit that whole format of eerie, ambiguous,
paranormal-ish.
Yes, and it kind of leads at the end. There's never really a 100% resolution.
Well, the audience gets to figure that out, right?
Exactly.
And if you piggyback off of something like that, it keeps the audience thinking about your show, and it's kind of a psychological trick. You leave them wondering how the resolve is, and then you go to the next episode. You're constantly it's creating wonderment in your audience.
Exactly.
Which
right.
is really, really cool.
So I don't know how that's gonna. But it is kind of fun to go beyond something you're comfortable with. I'm so comfortable with true crime, but it's
one thing I learned this weekend at Podfest was there's full-on podcasts that are done for a specific purpose, and sometimes it has a finite life. Some people just do a podcast for 8 or 12 episodes, and it's on X subject, and they're like, we're not coming back to this, but like, we're going to promote this because it adds value and it offers value to people, and sure, whatever. It doesn't have to be one that goes on for 20 years like Joe Rogan,
Exactly. Well, I mean, the sky's the limit, and it is so fun to stretch your creativity and just see how far you can stretch that creativity and discover new things about yourself. I mean, I'm writing these. Of course, I am getting help with ChatGPT with the help of ideas for these stories, but the ideas are mine and the concepts are mine.
Right.
But it inputs some really valuable ideas. I love it.
Well, I'm looking forward to this new one. Definitely, because that's much more up my alley. You'd think with all the horror music that I write, I would be more of a true crime person, but quite honestly, I'm more of a sci-fi paranormal type of person.
True crime is not, and it's mostly women that are drawn to true crime, and I don't know why. There's a psychological answer to that. I don't know, but I know true crime isn't for. I mean, most people in my life are not drawn to true crime.
Yeah,
we're a special breed, I guess, but most people like the paranormal type stuff.
Yeah. So. Yeah, there's a few podcasts I've heard over the years that have paranormal and UFO sci-fi kind of elements to it that have interesting, like, a lot of it's fictional or a lot of it's conjecture, like maybe this is real, maybe it's not.
Right.
What do we know? We have this finite time frame on this billions years timeline. Who the heck knows? Who the heck knows what our purpose is? Why are we here? No idea.
It's all it's when you think about it, it's all a mystery, isn't it? Our life and everything is just there's more questions than answers. But
you know what isn't the current moment? Like the current moment, and that's where a lot of us don't spend a lot we don't spend time here.
Yes.
In the moment, in the discussion in front of us, that we're thinking about, oh, what bill do I have to pay? Where am I doing next week? Or that huge mistake I made 20 years ago. That doesn't exist anymore. It only exists here. And that memory isn't even accurate because every time you think of something, you rewrite it. So by the time I've had communicate with people from 20 years ago, and I have a completely misremembered history of some things with them. I'm like,
you're exactly right.
That didn't happen. I've been thinking about that for years, and it's not even what. Oh, okay, I should probably leave that behind me and just think of myself as the here and now, and work on
Exactly.
that going forward, right? So, but it takes time.
Funny you should say that, because I've always lived in the moment. I very rarely have planned out to beyond a week in my
Okay,
life. I've always conducted my life that way, which is
that's fascinating.
why I, on a whim, usually start things. I started my podcast on a whim, but there is a balance there. You do have to somewhat plan ahead, and I have learned to do that now. I'm planning ahead a little bit more on my podcast or whatever, but living in the moment really is something. There is value to that, because really that's all we have.
Hmm.
We don't know what tomorrow and yesterday's gone. So
Right. Well, that's a great note to end on, if of any. So why don't
right.
you
Yeah.
remind me, Madeline, uh, the current podcast name and the new podcast coming out for my audience's benefit?
Okay, well, my current podcast is called Crimeatorium. I just added the true crime onto it for SEO purposes.
Hmm.
I went years just Crimeatorium, but now it's Crimeatorium True Crime. And Crimeatorium is kind of a play on, I like a play on words. It's kind of a play on crematorium
Mm.
and crime. So if you remember
Sinister.
it that way. Yes, it's sinister. I'm such a sinister person. I'm like the least sinister person you will ever meet.
You're the most pleasant true crime person I've ever discussed.
Exactly. I mean, if you were to see me, I'm not at all like this dark type person at all, but I do have this dark side of being fascinated with true crime. So Crimeatorium True Crime, you can find it on any, your favorite platforms. And then Enigma, you just spell it Enigmatorium.
Mm-hmm.
And that should be distributed to all platforms as well. I just put out the trailer for it a few weeks ago, and in fact, I used 11 Labs for the voice for that. Ooh. And it turned out so good. I was so pleased with that. I love it. I love 11 Labs.
Yeah, and it's cheap. It's like
it's like
lowest level is like $5. Yeah, I was just gonna say
$5
for like
a month.
10 or 15,000 words.
Well worth it. It's well worth it.
Yeah, and you can train it on your own voice. You can train it on. I mean, I would stay away from celebrities.
I mean, I did try. Just experimenting on it. I trained it on my own voice.
Yeah.
And when I heard my voice back, I thought, oh, please tell me that's not what my voice really sounds like. Because I do think that I have my son always tells me this, that, I was born and raised in Utah, and I think we do have a certain way of pronouncing some words here. Like, we have beautiful mountains here, but we don't pronounce the T. We say mountains.
Okay.
Or,
it's a mild difference, but it's not as direct as, say, Creole or something like that. Like,
right.
I don't see a huge drawl in it. Drawl. Whatever. Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Midwestern drawl. I can catch that. My sister's been in Kansas for 30 years and just outside of Kansas City. And I can tell that accent. Yours, not so much. I could say you were Mid-Atlantic, potentially, maybe even like you got like almost a Connecticut accent. Connecticut's pretty benign.
Yeah.
Unless you're really close to Rhode Island and Boston, then you'll start getting like that paktika,
right.
You get close to New York, you're in Fairfield County, you get the Brooklyn accent or the the Long Island accent. But I don't know. I people said when I moved down to Florida we had a particular accent, but you never notice it on your, like, what? This is just how I talk. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I wasn't really aware of it until I started hearing myself talk, and I really don't. I try to avoid listening to my own episodes because I'm way too critical. But anyway,
Well, it was great having you on, Madeline.
Yes, thank you.
I hope we can do this again real soon and do some
I would
updates
love to.
on the podcasts that are coming up, the new podcast coming up, and talk about that. And yeah, I look forward to also making sure that you're getting the tunes that you need. So
Well,
definitely,
as long as you've given me an open door to contact you if I need
absolutely,
anything, because you have, I don't know, maybe you do realize, but to be able to turn to someone that composes music, and to ask them to compose a piece that is just your own,
hmm
just like, you did my intro,
right,
and I use that with every episode, and that's my own, and I love that.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
But even if I were to ask you to compose something, let's say I asked you to do the one for Enigmatorium that was sort of a play off of the Twilight Zone theme.
hmm,
I wouldn't even care if you put that up for everybody else to download too. That wouldn't.
yeah.
So if you wanted to do something like that and then put it on your site and then have it available to other creators, that's fine with me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the beauty of this style of distribution too, is that I think people like yourself, you appreciate the fact that somebody's taken the time to find the vision of the style that you're looking for, but at the same time, uh, like you don't expect it to go there and not do any work anywhere else, right?
Exactly.
You're like,
No,
oh, this yeah, it sets the tone for the intro to my thing, but it may add some utility to somebody else. And
exactly.
you're not covetous of that. That seems
No,
like a strong word, but you know what I mean? Like,
I
yeah,
know what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that as a Creative Commons composer and royalty-free composer, and I'm sure my audience appreciates it as well, because sometimes they'll hear something like, "Damn, that's a really good. I'd love to use that piece in something." My
Mhm.
D&D stuff is like that. I've got a a friend that does stuff that I'm actually interviewing next week that has like he runs like 6 or 7 D&D campaigns at once. I don't know how he does it, and they're different. Like they're they have different elements, different characters,
D&D,
different
like Dungeons and Dragons,
yeah,
or what?
but
Oh,
those kind of RPG games, a lot of
right.
people do it
Yeah.
online now,
Mhm.
and they have platforms like Roll20 and D&D Beyond that have like a digital format for them to be like, say, they put up like a map, and they still it's still theater of the mind in a lot of cases, like the
Mhm.
DM is explaining what's happening, and then there's a roll for initiative when there's a battle and all this stuff, and then people have to take their turn, but it's far more visual because you've got people live stream, you see their characters, a lot of times they dress
Yeah.
up, so it's kind of
Oh,
it's much
interesting.
more interactive, and and there's like a big resurgence for it. So, but
Oh, I didn't know
that being
that.
said, a lot of my action and cinematic stuff lends itself well to that, and I've been doing some intros for stuff like that. In fact, there's one campaign that has more of a spaghetti western feel to it. So that's one of the albums I've got in the pipeline right now that I need to make some more tunes for him coming up. So I've got a lot to do. I've put myself out there, Madeline.
I don't know how, honestly. I don't, and I'm not just tooting your horn. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how it really, for those of us that don't do what you do, as far as being able to just dream up a song in your head and then compose it. I have no idea. To me, it's like people that can draw or paint, just create something. I'm in awe of it.
Well, thank
It
you.
really is admirable. It is a gift.
Well,
It really is a gift.
it's like your writing. I'd have to parallel and toot your horn back and say, like, writing a episode or a series of several episodes on one subject that's an art that takes an understanding of storytelling and keeping it interesting. And clearly you've garnered and built a reputation and a following of people that basically helping you do this as the only thing that you have to do to support yourself. And that's fantastic. I mean, I still consult and do other things to generate income, but the ultimate goal with what I'm doing is that the royalties, the Patreons, and the affiliate marketing and anything else I can wrap around it is going to pay for it. And I never have to go back to corporate America again, because no, thank you.
No. I mean, once you've done that, I mean, I'm sitting here in my pajamas.
Yeah.
Once you've done this, you really don't want to go back.
Commuting and I don't know if you know anything about Florida and the Tampa Bay area, but my God, the amount of people and the influx of people coming in here.
Oh, I bet. Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Has been crazy.
Has it been a lot, like in the last few years, a lot of people coming in?
Yeah. I mean, I moved down here in 2013, and the area I initially moved to was pretty much mostly farmland. And now there's like 30 to 35,000 houses on the books to be built in that area. And I look at these communities popping up with thousands of homes. I'm like, where the hell do these people work? You know, there's
exactly.
You know, and how far do you have to commute for it? And if you're online, like, I don't know. It's crazy. Well, I enjoyed this very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your patronage and you resonating with my music. And I hope we can work together for many, many years going forward.
Oh, I would love it. Anything that you want to collaborate with, or any, you know, you do this documentary stuff or whatever, anything, I would love to be considered to be part of.
That's awesome. I appreciate it.